Hi everyone, I'm Rochelle Rizzi with Vrai Nord, and today I'm here with Donna Cardillo. She's a keynote speaker, author, and retreat leader, and also we love to call her the inspiration nurse. She is just full of joy, vigor, and hope for everyone while she focuses a lot on the medical community, and I know that's really touching all of us right now during this time with the pandemic. Her message goes beyond and touches on all people. I know I have a lot of entrepreneurs here on the show. I just want everybody to listen to her message and her true north story. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Rochelle. My pleasure to be here with you and all of you today.
Tell us how you turned a corner. I've read your book. I love it. You have several books. The one that I have really fallen in love with is Falling Together, which speaks to my heart as a woman, as a mother, as an entrepreneur. And I know that it hits a broader audience and it tells a lot about your true north story, but tell everybody more about it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm a registered nurse, and I started out envisioning myself as your typical nurse working in a hospital. That's pretty much what I knew about the nursing community. And that was all great. I worked in emergency rooms and psychiatric hospitals. Then my career took a non-traditional path as a nurse, and I discovered there were a lot of opportunities for nurses out there. And I worked in the medical weight control center. I worked for a medical education company. I worked for a hospital in quality improvement. So I did a lot of interesting things. And I began to discover in my first 20 years in nursing that nurses really have a lot more opportunities than the average nurse is aware of. I certainly wasn't aware of them. Plus, the average nurse really doesn't know how to market themselves in the job market, because really in the profession that we're in for a long time, you could literally just show up at any hospital, show your nursing license, and you could get hired almost on the spot. So many nurses never had resumes, didn't really have any substantive interviews, and that was just kind of something that was foreign to us. So I began to understand in a particular job that I had years ago that, wow, it would be interesting to teach nurses more about what's out there for them. And during that time, I was active. One of the things I always profess is the value of being active in professional associations, because you meet so many interesting people and you learn a lot of things. You get exposed to different ideas and information. Through involvement in a professional association, I met another nurse who I had to hire to speak at a conference, who was a full-time speaker. And at the time that I met her, I had no idea that people did that. They were full-time speakers. I said, "You mean you travel around and people pay you to speak?" She said, "Yeah." I thought, wow, that's really cool. And during that same time, I was being required to do a lot of speaking for a job that I had as a nurse in a hospital. I did not want to speak. I was a reluctant public speaker, like the majority of the population is. But I was doing that. I found out she could, people were speaking. And I thought, maybe someday I could teach nurses about all the opportunities that are out there and teach them how to market themselves. But Rochelle, I had that idea for 10 years before I actually acted on it. So I just said the first 20 years of my career. I didn't have the idea after 20 years. I had the idea probably 10 years into my nursing career, but it took me another 10 years then to actually act on this big idea that I had. And I like to share that with people, because many people, if they meet me today, I'm in business 25 years last September. It's amazing. This is my 26th year in business. People meet me and they see who I am today and my energy and maybe my perceived confidence and success in their eyes. And they think that this is where I started 25, 26 years ago. But in fact, I was feeling very unsure, very uncertain, low self-esteem at the time. And I had actually hit a low point in my life. I was just feeling like there was, I was just not happy. I had a nice husband, nice house. It wasn't anything like that. But there was something within me that just didn't feel like I was doing what I should be doing. And I thought, wow, I just low self-esteem, feeling almost depressed. I don't mean clinically depressed because that's something completely different, just really low in spirit. And when I began to think about what it is that I really wanted to do with the rest of my life, that idea that I'd had for 10 years about starting a business, becoming a professional speaker, and running seminars for nurses finally came to front of mind. And, you know, I always say thinking about things and doing them, as you well know, are two completely different things. So I like to share that I had that idea for 10 years because sometimes people think, oh, you know, you just jumped on it and you did it, or they've had an idea for a long time. People are usually surprised to hear that I thought about it for 10 years. And it's never too late to go out there and do what you have to do. I think sometimes the timing just has to be right for you, things that are happening in the world. And actually at that same time, nurses were starting to get laid off from their jobs in hospitals and were looking for other things to do. So I realized that if I didn't bring my seminars out there to teach nurses about other opportunities, somebody else eventually would. And I didn't want to live with regret for the rest of my life. So that's really what pushed me to take the plunge. I didn't come from a place of confidence. I didn't come from a place of high self-esteem or energy, or even any sort of assurity that what I was planning to do would work. I had no idea if it would work, but I decided I was going to get out there and give it a try.
Was there a moment in time that you just had a switch, something snapped and you said, now's it. I'm just going to, like, tomorrow, I'm going to just do this?
Yeah, it was the one day I was sitting at home, I remember, and I had been feeling low for a while, and I was feeling really low. I felt myself sinking into a deep, dark hole, in fact. It was kind of scary. I thought, if I don't do something now, I may never be able to pull myself out of this dark place. And so that was the day and the moment that I made a decision that I was going to start a business and become a speaker and run these seminars. And in that moment of making that decision, Rochelle, that's the moment that my life changed. And, you know, I've heard other people talk about this, motivational speakers and others, the power of making decisions. Once I made that decision, I then committed to making that work. And suddenly everything changed for me. Suddenly inactivity transformed into energy, and feeling sluggish and tired was transforming into motivation to get me out there. And that's when things all started to change. Not that I knew how to start a business, not that I knew what I was going to speak about, but that's what got me started. And actually, I went down to the public library. That was the very first thing I did, because I knew that if I was going to get out there and do these things, I had to get more positive and upbeat and motivated. And I wasn't feeling any of those things. I went down to the public library, typed in the word motivation in the search bar on their computer catalog, and I started reading all these inspirational and motivational books. And I really began to feel myself lifting up and starting to truly believe that I could do the things that I wanted to do.
What do you remember reading that made you feel that way?
Well, one book that had a particular impact on me was Anthony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within. And I read the book, I listened to the book on audio, I read the book again. And when you want to do something that you perceive is really outside of the box or outside of your comfort zone or beyond anything that you ever previously imagined you might do or could do, it's sometimes necessary to listen to someone else telling you why you can and why you should, and to go after your dreams. And even the title, Awaken the Giant Within, that's kind of what was happening with me at that time. Anthony Robbins is very successful for a lot of reasons, but you know, some people may not like his stuff or don't want to read it. So that's not the only book, but that was one book that really did have an impact on me. And I also read a book by Mary Kay Ash, who started Mary Kay Cosmetics. And her story is very inspiring. She was, she had small children when she started her business. She started it, I think, at her kitchen table. So many things happen at the kitchen table. And the more people I met and the more stories I read, I thought, you know what? I may never do the big things that they've done, but I want to at least get out there and try what I perceived as a small thing in the beginning. And those stories charged me up.
Well, and I think that you were really true in your talent. And when you're true to yourself, you find a lot of joy in what you end up doing and being of service to other people. And Donna, I haven't known you for a really long time, but every time we've spoken, I have felt such such a stir in me of just inspiration. And after reading Falling Together, I wept after the first
Oh,
chapter because
oh,
I knew I wasn't alone. And I know that that's what
mm,
you're doing by sharing your story with other people, to know that you can come from that deep, dark place and find inspiration from, yes, the energy around you. And you do have to make a conscious shift at some point to go searching for it. And
yes.
maybe even just a consciousness of letting it in, like
Mhm.
letting the change happen, being
Yeah.
open and ready for the opportunities to come in. And I know that right now, going through COVID, a lot of nurses and anybody in the medical field, and I know we're all feeling the effects, but let's talk about nurses in particular and the burnout.
Yeah. So of course, the hospitals have been slammed beyond anything that we've really ever seen in our lifetime. And not only are the hospitals busting at the seams, have they been, people are just sicker than ever. More people are dying. Family members can't be around. Family members are not only there to help and support the person who's sick, but also it's a great help and comfort to the nursing staff to have family members around also, because they can help and support the care. It really takes a village to get someone healthy and well and to care for them. So nurses have really been pushed to their physical, emotional, and spiritual limits beyond anything any of us have ever known. And we're not machines, we're human beings. So we're in a helping profession. We want to help, we want to be there, but there's just so much that we can actually do in a day, in a week, and in a month. But in spite of that, when we're, and listen, there are people that go to war and fight that are in, and this is, and face similar types of challenges where you just have to keep going and going and going. But when you're pushing yourself and when a lot is being required of you, and this is totally applicable to nurses, we also have to take some time to disengage from our work in our off time when we're home. There's lots of ways that people disengage through various self-care, spending time in nature, playing board games with family or friends, taking a bath, reading a book, lots of different ways to disengage. That time of disengagement is when we renew and we refresh, and we're not only rebuilding our energy, we're building change stamina. We're able to then go back into that crazy, chaotic, fast-paced situation and actually tolerate it better. But we have to periodically pull away in order to more passionately re-engage in that work. That's a message that everybody has never heard and doesn't necessarily know about. So it is an important message. Even in the course of a very challenging, busy workday, stepping outside for a couple of minutes, breathing fresh air, listening to the birds chirp, feeling the sun on your face, that can help to shift your energy, disengage you, so you can passionately re-engage with your work.
Yeah, and I imagine that it's really difficult in their environment, in their day-to-day work, to see the long game, because there's so many tactical things that have to get done every day that are literally life and death. And to see where they're going to be, like what kind of advice do you have for them to have a vision for their life, to not lose sight of that piece of them?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll tell you is that nurses are typically a great support to one another, and even the whole, and by the way, I want to make it clear that all nurses don't work in hospitals. It's very important to understand that 100% of nurses are not in hospitals in this situation right now, probably about 50 to 60% of all nurses. And naturally, there are a lot of other people involved in the care of people that are very sick as well. But I have seen nurses are incredibly resourceful and resilient by nature. And I have seen a lot of wonderful things going on in different hospitals and healthcare facilities where they're creating their own connections, their own disengagement. Some of them might actually start the day with just some fun thing that they do together as a team to get themselves going and pumped up and feeling positive and feeling connected. I definitely talk to nurses about self-care and about being mindful and deep breathing. And that's some of what I bring to the table in that situation. I've been doing a lot of virtual programs for nurses and healthcare professionals, particularly in hospitals and healthcare facilities, to help people to step back and to give them some tools, to give them some advice and techniques that they can actually use to disengage and replenish themselves to be able to get through the tough times that we're in right now. And even the work that we do on a regular basis. Caregiving is a tough job in any position.
Absolutely. You're right about that, because we might experience that in our own homes.
Yeah.
When we're recording this, we are just days away from Valentine's Day.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a day of giving a lot of times. I think too, though, you're very focused on the self-love piece. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that? I mean, you mentioned the tools of deep breathing and walking and things like that, but talk more about that importance of taking care of yourself so that you can take care of other people.
Yeah. And so, Rochelle, a lot of people think of self-care as a reward or pampering or luxury, something extra to do if and when they have time. And I say it's none of those things. I say that self-care is as vital as eating and sleeping to our physical, emotional, and spiritual health and well-being. It's absolutely vital. And if we are, and I'm just going to say we, let's say in healthcare right now, if we do not make a commitment to self-care, if we do not make it a priority, we're not operating at our highest level. We're not living at our highest level. So working more hours isn't necessarily the best way to help. Working harder and longer, equally as important. Actually, working harder and longer isn't generally a solution. Sometimes we're forced to do that. But equally as important is focusing on ourselves. Self-love is a phrase that's very tough for a lot of people. So I really just would talk about taking care of ourselves. Even if you don't feel good about yourself or you're not comfortable with the concept of self-love, understand that taking care of yourself is just vital for you to continue to be really operating at the top of your game. And for those of us that are in healthcare, we can't possibly be giving our best to the patients or the clients that we work with if we're not taking that time to take care of ourselves. I encourage people sometimes to write a love letter to themselves, and to sit down and write from our wiser, loving person, and write a letter about all the things that you love about that person, or that you want that person being you, that you want to talk about, the good things about you, the great things that you've done, why it's important to take care of yourself, and write it in a very, very loving way with an affectionate salutation, "My dearest Donna," and then sign it with great love and hugs from you, of course. And you can do a couple of things with that letter. You can put it in an envelope, self-address it and stamp it, give it to a friend and ask them to mail it to you in a couple of months, because usually once you pass it off, you don't even remember it. And then something comes in the mail and you're like, that looks like my handwriting. And you open it and you get a lift. Or you can just fold it up and leave it somewhere in your journal or on your bedside stand where you're going to read it periodically. And we have to nurture and take care of ourselves. We can't rely and depend on other people to do it for us. We have to save ourselves or we remain unsaved. And it can be a learned skill. And I say to people, it's not about deserving it, and it's not about you maybe even feeling love for yourself, but sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. So you go through the motions. I deserve it. I'm valuable. I'm contributing a lot. You say those things, you say positive things over and over again. You get into a positive daily ritual. It starts to make a difference.
And it's interesting how we start off life with that innate ability to love ourselves and somehow lose it along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
From judgment or being burned by experiences or people.
Yeah. Or what other people say. Yeah.
I'm really conscious of that because I've been in the deep, dark space, post-divorce, walking away from my businesses, being a mom of 4 children and having to redefine myself. And that was, for me, that was my darkest moment in my life so far. And I don't wish that on anyone. And as an entrepreneur, I am especially conscious of making sure to share my vulnerable side so that if someone is having a bad day, they can see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You have to open your eyes. You have to want to see it, and you have to believe that it's there. and surround yourself with people who will help you, and just be open to it, because you're full of possibilities and just absolutely limitless potential. And you clearly preach that, to all people that you come across. And I think that leads me to my next point that I want you to talk about, which is the new nurses coming upon us, because that's the next big thing. Is graduation is
Yeah.
nearing, and it may be a virtual commencement, but these
Yeah.
nurses are entering the workforce. And what kind of advice and tools do you have for them?
Yes, Rochelle. So I love student nurses. I love new nurses. They are the future of my beloved profession. And I was once, all experienced nurses were once exactly where they are now. It's very overwhelming to actually get out into the real world of nursing after, however many years of school you've been in. But nursing is a wonderful profession. It's the most diverse profession on the planet. It is an incredible opportunity to help people and improve lives of patients, clients, and family members every day in any situation that we work in. It can be particularly challenging, and it is particularly challenging for nurses coming out in the middle of a pandemic, not just because they are indeed having virtual graduations and pinnings, but they're starting their career, those who start out in a hospital, in one of the most acute, fast-paced, stressful, overwhelming environments that anybody could possibly start in. It challenges the most seasoned nurse, and it certainly challenges new graduates in particular. So I remind new graduates that, first of all, they are part of a unique period in history. And it is kind of important to remember that they'll have stories to tell someday. And I encourage them to take notes, because they'll want to write about their experiences during this time or any time in the future. It's also very important to get active in nursing professional associations, because you cannot operate alone or stay isolated in nursing and be successful. You really need to have a soulmate or more in nursing that you can talk to, that people understand what you're going through. You have to build a community for yourself, staying in touch with your fellow students and professors, as well as becoming part of the team at work. And when you're the new kid on the block, it's always a little intimidating, but that's okay, because you've got just as much to offer as anyone else does in that setting. And we need you, we love you, and just, go in and do what you've been studying and preparing to do for a couple of years. And I also remind nurses that all of us had new things to learn when we got started. And every day on the job, you're more experienced than you were the day before. And every week, more experienced than the week before. And weeks turn into months, and months turn into years. And before you know it, I tell new nurses they'll be doing what I'm doing. They'll be writing books for other nurses and speaking to nurses and inspiring them. And I look forward to hearing that and seeing that and working with them.
Coming full circle.
Yeah.
I think that you might have on your desk a couple of things you can flash for us, especially
Yeah.
I want to talk to, I think, do you have that journal? I want to show
I
them
do. Yeah.
the journal, because I think I personally am looking forward to getting this for a couple of new nurse students that I know
Thank
of.
you.
Wouldn't that be amazing to write in this day book
Yeah.
for them at like each year and see how they progress too?
Yeah, there's every day has a inspirational message or a tip, and then there's some room to write some things down. There's a monthly career essay. This book was written specifically it's called a day book for beginning nurses. So it can start at any time of the year, though. There are even some hospitals that use this book, and they read the daily entry every day to start the classes that they have for new nurses that are starting out. So yeah, it's a great gift book. And I also, my very first book, which is now in the second edition, is called Your First Year as a Nurse, and making the transition from total novice to successful professional. I like to say that it's all the things they don't have time to teach us in nursing school, but that you need to know to be successful in the profession. And that is also used by a lot of hospitals, a lot of schools of nursing, a lot of transitional information to help new nurses and students to even make that transition and become successful clinicians and go on to have a wonderful career and build a legacy of caring in nursing.
Well, you truly are the inspiration nurse, but I just want you to know that you are taking the pulse of everybody you touch, like just the energy exchange from everything that you're creating touches us all. Your inspirational cards, that day book, by the way, I'm not a nurse and I find value in that.
Yeah.
This book, which I'll flash mine so people know who are following me know that I read in the pool. And this one, this one fell in
Fell in the pool.
as I was trying to balance with my one arm. And it's still very high quality because it didn't really bleed at all, I have to say. But this is the book I was speaking. This speaks to anybody who reads this. It's falling together. Nobody ever talks about you see titles that are like rise together. And there is this bottom line theme of coming up within this book. But the falling piece, I thought, hey, how did you come up with that title?
Well, the title of a book, I've written 4 books so far. The title is a very interesting process. It evolves. It goes through drafts and opinions. And I was thinking of falling, so much people talk all the time about things falling apart in their life. And, oh, my life is falling apart, my relationship's falling apart. And I thought, yeah, we all experience that. We all have those moments of falling apart in our life. We have multiple moments of falling apart. So I was trying to think of what would be the opposite of falling apart. And that's how I originally came up with falling together. And it was not until I had settled on the title of that book that I found a quote from Marilyn Monroe, which I actually have in one of the title pages of the book. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but she said, sometimes other things have to fall apart before really good things fall together. And I thought, oh, there you go. There it is right there. So I did take that quote and use it in the beginning of the book, but so that's how I came to that title. And the title really resonates with people. They say, oh, falling together. I love it. The opposite of falling apart. I say, exactly. That's exactly what it's about, because we all fall apart periodically. Things fall apart in our life, but it's all about falling back together again and coming out stronger.
Yeah. And I think fully assessing what you have, you're taking inventory. I kind of relate to cleaning out a closet. You have to empty it all out and make this big mess and blow it all up and then put it back together in a more organized way. And over time, do a self-check and inventory your life and make sure you're on the path that you want. It's so easy to get distracted or just go rogue on just because you're reacting every day instead of coming back to yourself. And I know you speak a lot to that.
Yeah. And Rochelle, the big part of the reason that I wrote the book Falling Together is I had written several books, career-related books for nurses, as you know, and we talked about, and many people, nurses and other people were saying to me, when are you going to write a motivational book? When are you going to write a motivational book? You're so inspiring when I hear you talk. So I wanted to write a book that would be inspirational. And I purposely shared some of my stories, not because I thought people wanted to hear about my life, but I wanted to use some of my own stories as a platform for teaching lessons, because you or someone else may not have had my exact experiences, but hopefully you could glean lessons that I learned from my experiences and apply them to your own life. And that's one of the reasons I summarize the lessons learned at the end of each chapter in that book, which many people tell me is their favorite part, because I know when I read a book, sometimes I don't remember. I think, wow, that was a good chapter, but I don't necessarily remember the key points that I wanted to remember. So I summarize those at the end of the chapter. And I had to be very, very vulnerable to write that book. I'm not saying, oh, wow, I got divorced once, or, oh, wow, this happened. I really had to dive into it. And I had to revisit those experiences in my life when I was in high school and I felt just so inferior and insecure, and a teacher ridiculed me in front of the class. I wanted to tell those stories because what I've learned, Rochelle, is that these types of things happen to all of us. It's part of the human experience. But when we don't talk about it, we think we're the only one, or when we don't have an opportunity to meet other people and talk about it, we don't really know. After I wrote the book, a lot of people said, wow, knowing you or having heard you speak, I'm really surprised to hear about some of the struggles you've had and the difficulties. They said, but I'm really glad to know that. Not that I'm glad you went through any of that, but I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one that goes through these things. So that's why I wanted to really tell those stories too. But it's not all about me. Hopefully I teach a lot of lessons in the book. That was the whole point. And it has resonated with a broad audience. I wrote it for women in general, and many men have also told me how valuable the book has been to them, how much they got out of it. So
Right.
hopefully it's for everybody.
Oh, I think for sure that it is. I mean, the subtitle is How to Find Balance, Joy, and Meaningful Change When Your Life Seems to Be Falling Apart.
Right.
And I think that being vulnerable, brave doesn't come without vulnerability and fear.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
In spite of that, we step forward. And
Yes.
I appreciate you being on the interview today, Donna, because I hope that this is being of service to someone who needed to hear it today, to know that they too can step forward. And we all have a history, no matter what face we have, sunshine behind us, whatever it may appear. We have all been through something or are going through something. It's how we show up. So thank you for teaching us how to do that better.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on and asking the questions.